Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and this is my answering your questions video. Reading through them all, I don't think there's anything there, except maybe one that I am going to be vague with. I will answer your questions accurately and truthfully. The only question I may be a little hesitant with is a question by Paul Herman where he asks, what and where is my phylactery? I may keep that to myself. Okay. As you know, this video is powered by coffee. So here we go. All right. First off, thank you for those that asked questions in that previous video there. I have some questions, quite a few, by Van Scuda, question by Andy Cates, One Mr. Ghost, Paul Herman, and Squash. There's a lot to chew on here, so here we go. The questions, I should say, by Van Scuda. Thanks once again. He, she, they ask, how much time a week are you spending on D&D? 20 hours? No, 20 hours per session. So we play twice a month, every other weekend. And the bulk of my time is spent in the days prior to my session. But I'll probably spend a good 10 hours thinking through D&D a little bit on the off week. And then the week leading up to, or most importantly, I say the 2 days leading up to. So Thursday, Friday, and early Saturday is where I'll put another 10 hours in there. So the short answer of that complicated math, I spend about 10 hours per week on D&D. It's not until the last day or two before the session starts that I actually crunch down into the nuances and details of that particular session. The rest of the time of my D&D time, I've made a little bit of a mention of this in a previous video. My time spent on D&D is spent on myself. And I don't mean things away from D&D. I mean studying all of the stuff that I talked about in my previous video where I mention here's the things that you may be overlooking that can help you be a better DM. So I'm just fueling I'm filling up my cup of creativity. And then I unleash that on Friday, Saturday morning, specifically into the crunch of what's going to happen during that session. But there's the answer. I spent about 10 hours each week on D&D. Are you playing any other tabletop role-playing games, or did you? The last part of that, did I? Yes. A lot. But too many to count. All of them. I've been at this for 40 plus years, so I remember playing Twilight 2000, Top Secret, Boot Hill. I've done, of course, all the versions of D&D from, I think it's right there, even earlier. I didn't do the chainmail stuff, but the early, the early edition of D&D stuff, before there were any even hardcover books released. And then therefore Ravenloft. I've played a little bit in Dark Sun. I've played Deadlands. I've played Mutants and Masterminds. I have played Fading Suns. I've played very little bit of Firefly Serenity, I think, whatever it was called. What else? I've done Star Wars, I think the D20 version of it. I did Slay. I played Unknown Armies. I don't know if I mentioned that already. I've done Godlike. Now, as far as playing, pretty much everything on that list. I've run Warhammer Fantasy. I've run Dark Heresy. I don't think I ran the Space Marine one. I forget what it's called. Death Watch. I've played a lot of World of Darkness stuff. So none of the specifics like Werewolf the Apocalypse or Mage the Ascension, but just traditional. I think it was a green book with a red rose on the front, with a rose on the cover. That one. I don't know if that's old school version of it. I've been the Dungeon Master or the Game Master for Unknown Armies, Slay, Godlike, Dungeons & Dragons, of course, Warhammer Fantasy, and one or two other games. I've played a lot of different worlds and sort of offshoots of D&D, right? Like variants of it. We've done like Arcanist stuff. We've done Scarred Lands. so on and so forth. So there's a lot. You know, you can go down the checklist. Gamma World, I think, original stuff. I really had a lot of fun, and I think it was just more nostalgia and those that I was playing with that I remember the fond memories of other tabletop RPGs. Now, am I currently playing any others? No, that's all I'm playing. We just stopped playing. We only played a couple of sessions of this thing right here, Starfinder. A buddy of mine wanted to run this. Would I run it or play anything else? Yeah, certainly, of course. I actually want to give my current group a run if they're interested in World of Darkness. Vampire-ish stuff. And I would run Unknown Armies and I would run Slay. Those are probably my 3 favorites. Slay, Unknown Armies, and D&D are probably my favorite tabletop RPGs right now. Okay, next question. In your opinion, what is the most challenging player class from the DM's standpoint? He goes to say, for me personally, it's the frontline ones, Fighter, Paladin, Barbarian, as I'm playing with a group of beginners, and while the spellcasters haven't figured out their strategies yet, those guys, assuming he means the Fighter, Paladin, Barbarian, are dealing damage left and right with an AC way higher than the rest of the party. Yeah, a few points on this. So, to answer the question quickly, what is the most challenging player class from the DM standpoint? Spellcasters, possibly wizards. There's a few Mordenkainen's, the mansion, magnificent mansion. I made a video on this. Leomund's Tiley Hut, Find Familiar. See, I have a lot of veteran role players at my table, and even if, like in the case of my wife and my son, they're kind of new to D&D, we're on our 6th, 7th campaign in a row, so they've been playing D&D now for 6 years. So I'm sure your experiences may be different, and I don't quite remember when I had all beginners at my table, because that might have been 2 or 3 editions ago, where what classes were the most difficult for a DM to wrangle through may be different than what's in 5th edition. But for me, I will have to say the wizard classes. My players know what they're doing. And those that play the wizards tend to either min-max, metagame in a certain sense, really focus on maximizing and being as efficient as possible. And there's just so many options, so many tricks that a good spellcaster, you know, can chunk through that spell list and sort of circumvent things that I didn't think through. Number one, I allow that to happen, but that's perhaps for another video. I understand what you're saying, though, with a lot of damage. I find that a lot of range guys, like sharpshooter feats, ignoring half cover, things like that, I have found, even though the ranger has always sort of been the bastard of 5th edition, like everybody thinks they're weak, they have time and time again in every campaign, whoever's playing the ranger, if they're trying to be efficient, right? If they're trying to build a good build and not just focusing on the role play of it, I have found that the rangers, the range combatants in my party, deal so much damn damage. And I have so many players in my group, 8 players plus, that the ranger is not always like sitting in the back alone where I can kind of ambush them. They're always surrounded by 1 or 2 other players for support. So the range damage people definitely can bring a lot of hiccups for me. But most importantly, I think the spellcasters. Dealing with high AC and whatnot, you just have to be careful of trying to attack those PCs because they have a high AC, right? Because if you have something that has a plus 15 to hit the guys with high AC, the problem you're going to run into is you're going to completely squash the guys with low AC. So be careful with trying to balance through that. But the answer to that is wizards. I remember you saying that you're DMing most, if not all the time, by choice. If you were a player in a standard setting campaign, what would be a character concept you'd like to try out? That's a really good question. I don't do characters based on builds. I don't try and min-max everything. I don't give a damn. So what I do is I pick whatever real-life villain, hero, character is really inspiring me, and I try and build a character off of that, right? So right now, I would probably try and build Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday, Val Kilmer's take on it in Tombstone. So what does that mean? Is the gunslinger available, right? Just go right into the firearms. I would probably dump his constitution. I know that sounds terrible, but he was sick, right? So just think of the character Doc Holliday. Knowing when you're on death's door, you have a certain level of apathy to certain things, right? I'm your Huckleberry. Just kind of didn't care. He was more threatened. Yes, he was one of the fastest guns in the West, you know, and an incredible marksman and shooter, but also just that recklessness of, this guy's on death's door anyway. So I would kind of use those sort of things as a theme So the specific character concept I'd like to build and try out was I would try and build Doc Holliday in sort of a Van Helsing witch hunter format. All right. Are you using a DM screen? If yes, which one? Custom. No, I don't. I do not like barriers between myself and my group. I roll my dice in front of all my players at all times, all the time. It's added a certain level of value to the game and up the intensity rather than sort of the secretive nature of, oh my gosh, I don't know what the DM just rolled behind the screen. When the players see me grab a handful of dice, everyone kind of dials in and zooms in on what I'm rolling. I don't like laptops in front of me. I don't like iPads in front of me, like as a barrier. I may have things on the table to make it easy. I always have like notepads and stuff. I try and get very analog. While I allow, and it's cool that I have all the books on D&D Beyond, and most of my players are playing from a D&D Beyond screen, and they have their laptops. I'm a very analog guy. I despise pushing a button to roll dice. I will never, ever do that. I don't care how fancy the dice are. I don't care how fancy it gets. It's shit to me. Players want to do it. Whoever wants to do it, more power to you, great. The tactile feel of dice, nothing replaces that. I like the feel of just an old, crappy number 2 pencil in my hands writing on graph paper. So I try and get as analog as possible. But most importantly, I remove the DM screen because I just don't want those barriers. I like the interaction sitting at the table. And I'm not hiding any secrets. Whatever I'm going to fudge, I've manipulated the monsters and the CRs behind in prep time anyway. What is the most memorable or funniest story from one of your games? I could never answer that accurately and pick just a single one, but let's see. Give me a moment. Allow me to recharge. I don't have a real funny story that I can think of because we don't have fun in my game. No, I'm kidding. Most memorable, though. Wow. So we have a player I've talked about in different videos. His name is Justin. He actually just left last session. Last whenever he moved out of state. He's my cousin, though. He's family, so I will see him again. And I created this little global effect that we roll at the beginning of the session to honor him. He's the player that has, I'm not shitting you, in 5th edition, 6 or 7 campaigns, he's gone through like 22 characters. Maybe more. I think more. One campaign, I think he died. He made like 11 characters. So he's reckless. He's really unlucky. If I have 10 players at the table and I'm going to have a horrible affect only one player and everyone rolls a d10 and only whoever rolls the lowest, Justin will always roll the lowest. But he also puts himself in harm's way the most. However, as a person, as a human being, he's lighthearted. He's happy. He's enthusiastic. He brings good energy. He doesn't shut up. He talks a lot. He interacts with everyone. He's just an awesome human being, right? And everyone appreciates that. And also in game, though, he's the one that if I'm ever kind of throwing a hook out there for my PCs to latch onto, Justin's going to grab it. Please, please, please open the door. Justin's like, hey, you know what I'm going to do, guys? I'm going to open the door. Doesn't matter if it's talking to you in Abyssal. He's going to open the door. Anyway, Justin has brought about a lot of memories, but there was one where Justin was being reckless enough, as was often the case, but he was starting to, you're not just going to get yourself killed, you're going to get everyone else killed. You need to calm the F down. And it was, of all people, my wife. Now remember, Justin is family. My wife has fed this kid since he was 3 years old, right? My wife is the one that chimed in and went into this entire moment of role play in character of how his actions were going to affect the whole of the group, affect her character. And it was just this awesome, beautiful interaction because I think the fact that she chimed in, I just sat back. Everyone was like, oh, she's talking now, right? My wife is hesitant. She's not confident at the table. She always feels like she's making the wrong decision. She's new, okay? And she knows she just doesn't feel like she doesn't want to step on anyone's toes. She doesn't want to do or say the wrong thing, especially among veteran role players and people that know D&D for 30 plus years. And she chimed in, and I noticed the response Justin had is he kind of looked and was like, you know what? Okay, then I'm going to wait. Like, the fact that she brought something up, and I mean, we're talking minutes of role play back and forth, and, you know, everyone else was not bickering, but there was just a lot of cross-table discussion. And my wife kind of, once she started to speak up, I don't remember all the nuances and details, but it was definitely something along, you know, that had to do with Justin being really reckless and chaotic and doing something stupid that everyone knew. And she kind of squashed that right away. So that was a really cool memory that we had because it was coming from her. And it really showed that she paid attention and she really got invested into the game for, I don't want to say the first time, but one of the few times. And it really, you know, it meant a lot to me. It was really, really cool. Okay. On this note, do you still remember your first ever session as a DM? No. My first one? No, I don't. I do remember my first character. I based it around, if I'm right, no, I don't want to say it's my first character, because they may have been something that came out before He-Man, the cartoon, was released. But I do remember my earliest memory of the fond memory of a character I had is I built a character, and I think I named him He-Man, off of the cartoon character, whatever. So this is... just Google He-Man, Masters of the Universe, when that first came out, whether it was Saturday morning cartoons or otherwise. Hanna-Barbera sort of stuff. Whenever around that time period, that was one of my earliest memories of a character. It might have even been inspired by Arnold and Conan the Barbarian. But somewhere in the early to mid-'80s, I remember playing a He-Man character. You know, just larger-than-life, superhero-esque, wearing nothing but underwear and like a little cross vest, and that was it. So that was one of my earlier memories. As far as my first ever session, as a DM. I used to run my cousin in New York City back when I was 8-9 years old. Every other weekend we'd meet up, I'd run a session. It was always one-shots, and then the next time we'd meet, he'd run me through and I'd get to play. That type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I have a lot of memories. When it comes to memories, I can talk for 10 hours on that stuff. What are your favorite monsters to use in the 4 tiers of play? Well, first and foremost, I will say, I will answer the question, but I don't like to separate by tiers very much, right? I'm always real big on just because all you own is a knife does not mean everyone else around you is, might have a gun. I mentioned this in a previous video. I will shit stomp the group. I will squash you. I will kill the group. I will TPK you. You walk into the wrong woods. You walk into the wrong area. You start trouble in the wrong town, village, city. You'll interact with retired assassins level 20. And they're not just a behind-the-scenes threat, pulling the strings and the machinations of the big problem that the PCs... No, that guy himself will assassinate you. So get out of town. Just leave, right? So my favorite monsters in all of D&D have always been, for 25 years, giants. All of them. I have a little poster up on the wall. Hill giants. Any book that creates new stuff. Wasteland giants and haunted giants and ghostly giants and undead giants and whatever. Giants. So those are my favorite in all 4 tiers, right? Because I will just take any monster that I'm a fan of, like a storm giant. I'll figure out what happened and corrupted him that made him evil. I'll boost him up, give him more abilities, god-level power from his deity, and I'll make him a tier 4 CR20 storm giant. But I will have a CR17 or whatever's written in the monster manual. I will have those guys interact with level 1 PC. So all 4 tiers of gameplay, it's always giants. But what are my favorite to use in the 4 tiers? Low-level tier 1 stuff. I like goblins a lot. If you ever read Tucker's Kobolds, the threat they can pose, right? There's a certain level of craftiness, shiftiness, assholery about goblins, but yet there's also a level of ingenuity, and they have to be, right? Like, they're always sort of the kicked and shoved away in the corner, so inevitably they're gonna adapt. Like, there's a streetwise element. Like, they know their way around things on a very gritty level. So I like that intelligence because it gives me as the DM a lot of wiggle room to... They're the ones that would spread out when they know they're coming against a guy wearing a robe, right? Because there's a potential for some AE effect. They're the ones that will knock over walls and buildings and tables to create cover from your range combatants. And they're the ones that shoot you from murder holes, right? They always use things to their advantage. They're very crafty. You can have a goblin boss, larger than life, like jacked, super strong barbarian template, add some levels to him, and he's still a very high level threat for low level tier 1 gameplay. But yet you can also have an entire tribe of goblins. You can have 7 of them, and they're playing with a bomb, where now the bomb is a threat, and therefore the encounter's a threat. Or you can have 100 of them pouring out of caves, right? There's just a lot of places to go with them. When we get into 2nd and 3rd tier of gameplay, I like undead a lot. There's just a whole, ghosts, liches, or not liches, not yet. Ghosts, wraiths, specters, but then also not just the mindlessness. I like the horde mode in video games, Gears of War or Call of Duty. Just swarms of zombies, swarms of skeletons. I really like that because then I can also give them armor. They picked up various weapons, so you've got a bunch of pikemen up front, like an undead army, right? So now you've got glaives, and maybe one of them was formerly a battle master. Notice how there's a lot of sort of leveled classes that can go in the monsters I use. So tiers 2 and 3, I like undead, and then of course ramping up the intensity of undead when you get to tier 3, like vampires and maybe low-level lich stuff. Tier 4, I'm just a sucker for the big beasts. Large things. Purple worms, things that swallow, Tarrasque. I'm a huge... Number 1 animal in my life is a gorilla, silverback. So Giralon, right? But larger than life. A Yeti that's 30 feet tall. The one Yeti, that type of thing. So I just love anything that resembles Hulk from, Avengers. Green Hulk. Anything that's just roar, dinosaur-esque, but whatever, right? So those are my favorites. What books, movies, shows inspire you the most? R.A. Salvatore started it all. That was my inspiration. Tolkien, of course, but I think anything by Peter Jackson I really love. The Hobbits and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, with Fellowship of the Ring being my favorite. My favorite movie the best movie of all time is Braveheart. The only flawless movie I've ever seen, I cannot find one error with it, is Princess Bride. Stay with me here. And my favorite movie of all time is Rounders. The one with Matt Damon, Edward Norton, poker movie. Those inspire me for many different reasons. I love movies with really strong characters. And what I mean is like iconic stuff. So my big 3, Doc Holliday, which I've already mentioned, from Tombstone. So therefore I love the movie. I really love Maximus, Russell Crowe in Gladiator. I love the movie. I do like Mel Gibson a lot as William Wallace. So Braveheart, the best movie I've ever seen. I really like, especially Pirates 1, 2, and 3. But Jack Sparrow, Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean. And then I really love Denzel Washington in Training Day. Denzel's my favorite actor of all time. Al Pacino's kind of an honorable mention, second place there, between Son of a Woman, Godfather, Scarface, of course, stuff like that, right? So I really like characters. Those are the sort of things that inspire me. Yes, I will get visual elements from, the stuff on Netflix, Shadow and Bone, and just, Pacific Rim even, right? Godzilla, larger than life, the type of things that I enjoy and I used to just watch because my kids wanted to watch it. But as I've gotten older, I'm pretty simple. I'm easy to be it's easy to entertain me. I don't need to, not everything needs to be a Schindler's List level of, production quality, Shawshank Redemption or whatever, right? I just enjoy a good Pacific Rim. I enjoy Transformers. It's freaking robots blowing stuff up. So, Michael Bay. I don't mind that stuff. It's really easy for me. So I get a lot of visuals from that and Star Wars and the Avengers, of course, Marvel, DCU stuff. But I'm really sold on characters. Are the other walls in your room as cluttered with cool stuff as the ones we get to see in your videos? Stay tuned to the end of the video and I will put some pictures of the other walls. That's it from Van Scuda. 24 minutes, but I'm going to take however much time I need. I appreciate the questions, buddy. Thank you so much. Andy Cates. This guy is near and dear to my heart. What's up, buddy? Andy I consider him like a brother. Longtime friend. He's been in my games for the better part of 30 years. He's currently sitting at my tables. So his question, have you ever ran a game at a table that you weren't friends with the players? Not in a negative way, unless there was, but like at a convention or meeting all new people. I've played as a player. I have played with in a complete group of strangers, I knew going in, I never had any problems. I'm not confrontational at all. But I'm also not afraid to speak my mind, and I'm very comfortable. Let me back up. I'm comfortable with physical confrontation. I spent 20-something years boxing, fighting around some pretty rough people. I'm being dramatic, but when I say kill or be killed, right? But just, I've seen some things, I've been around a little bit. So I don't have any issue, I'll get up and walk away, right? If I'm not, my time is too valuable to waste energy on people that I'm just not having fun with. I'm also a social chameleon. I'm pretty damn good with including a lot of people. So I've been among players that I didn't know, and I did a good job of enjoying the game. But we knew going into it, myself included and all the other players, that this was going to be like a little one-shot or something like that, right? And that might have been at Outpost or the local gaming store, something like this. As far as running a game, I have run with people I didn't really know. They were like friends of friends or, friends of a family member. But I've never had an entire group where I didn't know all the players. I always had like, a friend of mine, a brother, or a brotherly figure, and then a couple of people that I didn't know. It's never been much of an issue. I feel like if you're a good facilitator, if you're a good leader, as long as you set the boundaries and say what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, so on and so forth, I can wrangle in just about anybody. Because anyone that I can't, you will know very quickly, you're not welcome at the table anymore, right? I'm not going to let bad energy or an asshole player sit around at the table and destroy the experience for me and everyone else. That's not going to happen very long, right? I'm very, very adept at that. So, I don't know if that answered it, but I've never been a dungeon master in a group of entirely new people. I think the one thing you do have to be careful with, and I've been cognizant of this, if that's the word, the taboo stuff, right? When you have brand new players, you need to check yourself and let everyone that you're familiar with at the table know, be careful, because we can be pretty ornery and ridiculous with our language and the things we discuss at the table. You just have to kind of be gentle at first and kind of tread lightly until you see where they push back and whatnot. So be careful with the things you discuss and the language you use and so on. Obviously, especially if it's a younger audience. And then his bonus question, who is your favorite player and why is it me? Well, that answers the question. It is you. No, obviously, near and dear to my heart, my wife, my son. Probably in that order. And then you are, Andy, you've just been I'm real big on any players that reciprocate. When they know and understand the effort I put in and when it's given back. If nothing else, just freaking listen. I put a lot of time typing this shit out and coming up with this story. Listen to it when I read it. And you've always been very receptive of that. So you're always welcome at my table, dude. On that note, anyone that becomes my favorite player or people that will be welcome at my table, I don't give a damn how well you play D&D or how well you think you play D&D, how much of a veteran you are, what you bring to the table, how geeky or nerdy you are. You have to be a good human being. If you are an asshole as a person, I don't care what you bring from a skill set, if there ever was such a thing, to the table. That's it for Andy. One Mr. Ghost asks, you have reviewed a couple of different Communitymade products, mostly from DM's Guild, I believe, on your channel. Do you now, or have you used any of them in any of your games? Yes, I have. I don't remember specifically which ones. 99% of the time, I am, of course, always, and I say this on the videos, I am very appreciative, thankful, especially back in the early days of the channel a year ago. I was churning through DM's Guild spotlights and reviews, right? People were sending me all sorts of stuff. So I am always grateful and thankful that I have enough of a community, I guess, or I've made enough of an impact that I've gotten $1,000 plus of free stuff sent to me, right? And some of them from pretty legit publisher type people. So I'm very appreciative of that, right? But there's never been any sort of, guarantee understanding where if I send you this, you have to use it, so on and so forth. But to answer the question, the monster ones, like the monster manual, the one I just did recently, I will pull monsters directly from that. But 99% of the time, it's inspiration. There's always a spark. There's always an idea. There's always here's a new book on magic. Ooh, I really like that magic item. And what I do, and I believe everyone should do this, it doesn't matter whether it's an official designer or it's independently published stuff. Take everything you read, use it to fill up your cup of creativity, and then twist it and wrangle it into your own version. So it fits your table with your group. So I've taken a magic item book that was put out there on DM's Guild, and I may have used a couple directly, but instead of like, I really like that ability on that sword, but I'm a huge fan of what that trinket is about. And I've meshed the two together to create a custom homebrew item that I gave to one of my players. One of my players was like, dude, this is awesome. Did you make up this yourself? No. Somebody wrote about this in DM's Guild, right? The idea of harvesting meat and, your kill in D&D and using that for various alchemical reagents and things like this. I've used those things a little bit. Little snippets of those charts for one of my players that was like, dude, every time we kill something, can I keep some body parts and make something with that? That poisonous snake we just killed, or that naga, are we able to take its blood and can I harvest rogue Thieves Guild poison from that? I've used, I don't know. But during prep time, I'll look on screen and I'll read and scroll through that stuff. So yes, I have used it, but I don't know that there's a lot other than the monsters that I've just pulled and plugged and played directly into it. Okay? Bonus question. How vanilla is your game? Do you write your own adventures or your own monsters or subclasses? I do not make my own classes and subclasses and races. That is coming up in my new Silberot world book. Do I write my own adventures? 100% of the time. Again, no, everything you do creatively, everything. I'm going to ruin your creative flow right now. Every idea you have, every single one, someone has already thought of it. It's out there. There's no such thing as a sacred, saintly product. This is my baby. I don't want to show it to anyone. It took me 15 years to learn this. Take your ideas and market them, sell them, whatever you're trying to do with it, and put it out there for the masses. Don't hold that stuff close to the vest. Let people edit it. Let people critique it. Your idea, no one's going to steal your shit. Everyone is too busy working on their own idea. So everything I do is inspired by something else. Everything I do. There may be a direct inspiration where I can be like, I just read this last night, and therefore I'm now going to create an adventure based on something that I read in the Van Helsing book. But after doing this for 40 years and being a geek and a nerd, I don't know what has directly inspired me, but I do write my own adventures. I don't like the read this to your players. I like to feel and read the table and weave through the energy at the table, the pacing. And I believe writing my own, and then I'm too excited about my own stuff. I've got my own ideas that I want to put out there. So yes, I write my own adventures all of the time. I have run Avernus, and that's probably the one game that fell short, that it just got a little stagnant, and I felt like I was starting to change it so much to keep good energy that I wasn't really using direct Avernus anymore. We might as well just make my own thing in hell. How vanilla is your game? As far as what my players' options are, like what books can they use? Does the Artificer function as written? Does the Barbarian function as written? Can the Battlemaster do these things? That's vanilla, right? Read the Player's Handbook, read Ravnica, read, if we're using a Druid of Spores, read Tasha's, read Xanathar's. Pull from that. If it's I always tell my players, if it's in an official written book, you generally don't need my permission. If you're trying to do something from Unearthed Arcana, run it by me first. I will never, my players know there's a few things, like Cloaks of Displacement, they don't exist in my game. My players already know the no's. Don't ask me. They're not allowed. That's a very small list. I've been trying more and more to minimize my house rules. So that's a really tiny list, okay? So other than don't ask me about the shit you already know the answer to, if it's in a book, just have at it. Play the way you want, right? I try and be a yes person to my players as much as possible. Otherwise, my house rules, crits are maxed, and then you roll all the dice. So if you're going to 3d6 weapon, you automatically deal 18 and then roll 3d6. The lucky feat is generally, so far, the last 3-4 campaigns, it's gone. It's removed. I feel like anything that's everyone has to take this thing, I like removing that from the game. I like to keep options in there. You don't have to give me a roleplay reason for multi-class, but don't just start going into all these multi-class dips just because that's what's going to give you some key ability in combat. Give me some flavor and reason why the hell your paladin went to warlock, into sorcerer, into barbarian. You know what I mean? But often with stuff like that, we work it through that together. You often don't have to tell me why your paladin went to barbarian to sorcerer, because your actions through the game and the way I've responded to you as a DM and the things I've offered to you kind of indicate it was natural that you were going down the path of warlock. I could tell. But otherwise, I don't have a whole lot of house rules, so my game is fairly vanilla. Now, I do make a lot of my own monsters. The CR system, I made a video on this. I think it's called The CR is Fucked. Excuse the language. It is. CR system is ass, jank, wank, whack. It's terrible. I change things a lot. I don't always make it even, where not every encounter needs to be deadly or tuned and balanced well enough. No, I will stomp you. I need to give you a way out. Not every combat needs to be resolved through, you need to parlay and learn to run. That my players know that. But I will tweak everything. Now, I don't go grossly overboard where I give every skeleton a lich template. No, because then it's just a lich at that point. So you have to have some boundaries. I've just been doing this for so long. And back when I started, there wasn't a lot of stuff written in stone. There were definitely no websites, no internet to go and pull from. So when I made some cool Gnashy monster with tentacles, I didn't really have... I had a Mind Flayer, but that was it. There wasn't Alhoon and then all these other variants of Mind Flayers and Tentacle this and that. There was just this thing, this face sucker thing. So I had to make my own stuff anyway. So I will just take monsters, twist and turn them. One thing I do often is I just take a template, like Four-Armed Giralon, and I give that to a Hill Giant. And it's Goro from Mortal Kombat, right? I will take Pack Tactics of Kobolds, and I'll give it to Enkhegs and say these are like Zerg, swarming, chittering Starship Troopers things. You see where I'm kind of going? I'll give, I don't know, a hag, right? Or a ghost, let's say. You age, incorporeal. And I will give that to whatever, right? Something that doesn't seem undead, but a fey creature. It's like, what the hell's going on? Why am I aging? There's something otherworldly and magical about this thing. So that is how I'll kind of Frankenstein my monsters. All right? I know it's long, but I wanted to really cover the questions. Paul Herman, how did you get into role-playing games? My cousin Jason introduced me. I had to be 6 or 7, so 1979, 1980, 81. I started asking questions when you start seeing these different cartoons, right? Look at anything from 1980 to 84, right? Think of Stranger Things. That was kind of my life growing up a lot. Very riding BMX bikes, riding skateboards, very outside, right? There was no cell phones, no internet, no such thing. Definitely no social media. So it was, interaction with human beings. So that became an easy thing because we might sit down and play Monopoly or whatever the games were back then, right? We play chess. I'd play pool, billiards with my father, so it was always me and other people sitting at a table, and we'd play poker and play cards and little games, and, not Uno or whatever came out in 1980, but you get it, right? Simple games, go fish, war. So you're sitting around a table initially, and then you just start getting excited. I mean, I remember a video, Todd McFarlane, the Spawn artist, comic guy, he said, almost every kid in the beginning, like you see monsters, and you see like Creature of the Black Lagoon, the original stuff, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Frankenstein, right? The one with like Gene Wilder, let's say, Young Frankenstein or whatever. And it's like, oh, that thing's kind of cool. Is that a monster? And then you like aliens. And then you like dinosaurs. And then you like, you know what I mean? And it just gets more crazy fantastical. They're the coolest toys. Then Nintendo comes out and you're playing all these things, and Zelda. And you start asking questions, and then your cousin comes up and he's like, hey, here's a book. Here's a Fiend Folio. Here's a red book. And there's a dragon in this thing. And remember the dragon from Dragon Slayer, or what's the one with Rutger Hauer? Lady Hawk or something? Anyway, you start getting into these things. And Conan the Barbarian, Beastmaster. And you start asking these questions in the early 80s. And your cousin introduces you to the books. You get them, and then you realize, wait, we can make our own stuff? I'm playing games on Commodore 64, Mazes and Monsters, and things like this. And it just becomes more outside of the realm of reality, right? More fantastical. Dragons and giants and all kinds of cool stuff like that. And the SSIs, Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds, things like that, right? So that's how I got into role-playing games. D&D first, and then very quickly we got into like Top Secret, Boot Hill, Twilight 2000, things like that. Did you ever DM a West Marches game or play in one? I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if that has something to do with Lord of the Rings or if we're talking Runehammer. Because I don't know what that is, the answer therefore is I have never. Paul, tell me about it. I'd love to learn a little more. What's your favorite D&D villain or villain from other role-playing games? Wow. Here's a good one. My favorite D&D villain. Damn. Klauth, I think. What was he, 3rd edition? So Forgotten Realms, I think, right? The Red Dragon. Yeah, if I thought on it more, I'd probably come up with something else. But, yeah, I like him. I like the... I don't like when they say, okay, here's a villain, but then they don't stat him. You know, or like gods, but then there's no stats on them. Because it removes... It kind of makes you feel like I'm not sure how to quantify whether players can actually do anything about this guy. Can we actually fight it? Once it's statted, it's like, I see its hit points. And actually, I just came up with another answer, and I'll tell you in a moment. But I like Klauth, you know, because I can like, all right, Ancient Red, but yet it still feels a little bit out of reach. You don't want to mess with that. I do have a villain from another role-playing game. There's a role-playing game called Slay. And the villain is Halloween Jack. I think he's the villain. Incredible. Now, if you ask me favorite villains from like media, no, it wouldn't be Joker. I like Vader a lot. But there's definitely Handsome Jack from Borderlands. That's a badass villain. All right. Paul asks, what and where is your phylactery? He needs to know for a friend. I will say this. My phylactery is in multiple parts. And without... My phylactery is a living thing. Where is it? If I told you, I'd have to kill you. And Squash. How do you pick monsters for your campaign? What do you look for exactly? Very, very good question. That alone, there's a few others in here, definitely. But that can certainly inspire me for a video, entire video. How do you pick monsters for your campaign? What do you look for exactly? You know what, Squash? I'm going to cop out, and I apologize. I'm going to give you kind of a short answer to kind of satiate you. Is that what it is? To quench your thirst? But I am going to make a video on this. Inspired by that question, so good on ya. Damn, I can go forever. I have to make a video on this. It may be coming later today. How do you pick? That's a good one. That's a phenomenal, phenomenal question. Because I think in thinking through how I do that, it might provide a lot of hints as to my process, to my creative journey. But also if I'm ever stuck. And you know I'm real big on the creative process, so I try not to have too much writer's block, so to speak. That really is a by answering that question, you open the floodgates in so many ways. That can be the launch point for all of my ideas creatively. How do you pick monsters for your campaign? What do you look for exactly? Cool. Interesting. Something that provides a sense of awe, wonder, and mystery that makes the players... There's more to it than this. Like, I don't like a lot of throwaway encounters. I think I mentioned this in another video. Combat with 8+ players takes too long at my table. I don't like to just bog down the table. And yes, I know combat in and of itself, within that window of initiative timing, can be exciting. But I don't like to... Cool, that was an hour and a half of time, and there's nothing that comes from that. I like, you know, to poke and prod with combat and kind of... I like things that beg more questions, that get people more excited, okay? So I really think through, what does this monster offer tactically? Like, what excitement can he bring to the combat? Is this just a meat shield, stands in front of the tanks, and hits them as hard as possible until they drop him, or vice versa? What else can this guy bring to combat? Like, what are the tactical things that please my, you know, that get me excited? I'm excited to grab all those dice. I'm excited to try this spell. But then beyond that, the roleplay implications. So how I choose monsters, what are the monsters that also, bring up the question, why is that thing here? This is the wrong terrain. What did he say in that language none of us understood? Where did it go? Those sort of things. So I'll make an entire video on this squash. So hopefully I answered just enough. But take a look out for that. That's 45 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. There was a lot there to chew through, a good dozen plus 20 questions. So there you have it. See you guys soon.